I'm Jeannie Lauren Dowden for Conduit News, and today we have attorney and chairman of the Washington County Republican Committee, Brian Lester, joining us here to talk about the recent primaries as well as the state of our state Republican Party. Brian, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
I have known you, we've known each other for a very long time, and but for those of our viewers who may not be familiar with you and your work and involvement in the state party, just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got involved in politics.
Okay, so currently I'm the county attorney for Washington County. I handle all the civil matters for the county. I work under the county judge. I took that position about 8 years ago when Joseph Wood was elected the first Republican judge in about 42 years to come into the office here in Washington County. And then I stayed on at the request of Judge Deakins, Patrick Deakins, who's our new judge, Republican. And so I've enjoyed that. I spent a little over 10 years prior to that in private practice, doing everything from family and juvenile law, the majority of what I did, to a little bit of everything. And so I've been doing that a long time. Politics is something that I probably haven't been super involved with until I really came to the county. I never was a member of the county committee until I came to the county and working with the county judge and Julie Harris, who was there at the time, now our president of our National Federation of Republican Women. I kind of got more involved with the actual Republican Party and the Washington County Republican Committee. But I'd done a lot in politics, had been active or outspoken about my political views and what was going on. As a lot of your viewers may not know this, but when Conduit first got started, there was a group of about 7, 9 attorneys, maybe a little less than that, who really kind of started the groundwork with what Conduit would do. And so I know Joe and Brenda will look back and remember those days. We took on Washington County Quorum Court back then on a transit tax issue that the taxpayers of Washington County were going to be burdened with paying for transit for Washington, Benton, Madison, and Carroll. The other 3 counties had said, we're not doing a tax for this. But the Quorum Court wanted Washington County too. So we challenged that in court. There was a lot of political grandstanding. We didn't win our court case, but we won the battle, the war, so to speak, because that tax got voted down. We then we represented a few Republican JPs over in Baxter County. Brenda and I actually made the trip one day, along with another attorney I won't mention, who's now in the Court of Appeals, because we thought we were maybe going to jail. Threat of litigation, some stuff. But anyways, took on another similar type issue with their county funding, I think it was like a trash service or something. But eventually the voters, denied that as well. And so been in the trenches with Joe and Brenda and with Conduit from the beginning.
I know, and we appreciate that. And I was thinking as you're talking, it's quite a feat for Washington, I think. For those of us who live here, it feels like a very blue, radical city.
Right.
And so for the Quorum Court for so long to have that conservative hold, I think is something, it's something to commend for the leadership.
Absolutely. We've done well. We've, in the 8 years that I've been here, we've made a lot of changes, and we, not being me, but being the leadership under the county judge, both county judges have been very focused on really making some good changes for the citizens of Washington County. We have Fayetteville. Fayetteville is going to be solid blue. That's just who they are. The only Democrats on our Quorum Court are all in the city of Fayetteville. And so outside of that, it's all Republicans. And we were met with the Benton County chair earlier this week, and they were talking about some issues they have. Of course, all 15 of their JPs are Republicans. And it's not without its problem. Talked to Judge Mooring up there, and they have their infighting and some things going on. But it's a much different dynamic for them than it is for us here in Washington County. And I will say, just from hearing from people across the state, when it comes to local county government, we definitely are the ones that everybody watches, because everybody sees us as kind of the crazy outlier because of all the fights and all the arguments. And, we've got some really, really people that are real far left. We have a lot of people that are real far right, and you get those people in, and it's just a recipe for some big explosions. And we've seen that over the years. And so it is what it is. But nonetheless, I think that Judge Deakins is absolutely steering this ship where it needs to be. And I think if you are a citizen of Washington County, you should be very appreciative of that because he's laser focused on what that is and he's
Yeah.
going to do great things.
That's great. Mentioning Washington County, Benton County, we recently had the primaries. Not really just a few contentious, exciting races, but overall, it was, not a lot to watch compared to, say, 2022.
Right.
What were your thoughts about the results here in Washington County? And then I guess maybe just the Northwest Arkansas area.
So I wasn't, like you said, there really weren't any big races in the primary. The one big race was for the 3rd congressional district seat, for our congressman. And I really felt like that race was a lot closer than I thought it would be. I did not, that's about the only thing that surprised me in that race is how close that race was. I did not feel like it would be that close. But other than that, I was happy with the fact that we got through this regardless. I think we have some really good candidates. All in all, most of our candidates were unopposed. There was probably one other race for a constable that kind of surprised me. That was probably the biggest surprise for me. Just looking at some local issue stuff, but other than that, I mean, we pretty much walked away scathe-free.
Well, and turnout was so low. And I think when you look at Benton County especially, I was surprised to see Womack didn't have the show in Benton County that I thought he would. Just turnout overall was incredibly low.
Yeah, the turnout's been disappointing. And we've seen that's been the trend over the last few elections is we're getting lower and lower turnouts. And it's very alarming. To me, it says that voters are becoming more and more disenfranchised with government. And, I wish I had the magic wand to fix all of that and to get people more involved. But I think that just goes to the core of where we are politically and how we've got to do a better job at the local level of engaging voters and getting them to turn out in our elections.
I want to talk to you about that later on because I think that's so important. Unifying our party, making sure everyone's heard, and then growing it.
Right.
So I definitely want to get to that. Governor Sanders, after the primaries, she sent out a press release saying that it proved to be victorious for those with endorsements from the governor. And that is true. And then I think it was also just a referendum on things that the legislature has passed and things that she has worked on to implement over her course as governor. What would you say to that?
I would agree. I think that our governor is a very popular governor. And I say that not just because of what we see here locally, but what I hear from people that are out and are going around as the primaries were going on and the caucuses and all the things that were going on throughout the country leading up to our primary. She is popular nationwide. I know, there's been several people I know that have been out and they have all said the same thing, that everybody just wants to hear about Sarah Sanders. And they're all, man, we wish we had Sarah Sanders as our governor. And I think that as we'll talk about party, unification, I think that's something we've got to all take into consideration. We're fortunate that we have a good, strong, conservative governor. We don't always have to agree. And in politics, we'll never all agree. My wife and I don't agree always in politics. That's just the nature of politics. That's human nature. But we've got to work on not taking a lot of those things too much for granted because that will slip away from us if we do. And so I think the governor's popular. I think a lot of her positions have been popular. I know that the left has absolutely hated every one of them. But there's a lot of people, a lot of conservatives who are breathing a sigh of relief. We finally have a solid conservative, hardcore conservative governor. Not that we haven't had those in the past, but she's much further right than her predecessor. And I think there's a lot of people that are happy about that. And don't get me wrong, this is how the pendulum always swings, right? You get one way and to get back over to where you want to go, you're always going to have those more center of the road type people. And that's what kind of, in my opinion, that kind of helps bring in a good, strong, 20 years ago, we wouldn't have elected a Sarah Sanders. It would have been way too far for too many people and it wouldn't have happened. And here we are. And it just takes time for us to kind of get to those places.
In the primary races, I know that the governor was involved, and I don't know if you were on social media a whole lot, but there were some posts and things that I was following, and legislators really got involved in some of these primary races as well. We haven't seen that a ton as far as legislators coming out, endorsing, throwing their weight behind particular candidates in primary races, or to the amount that Governor Sanders did. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that that's a good thing? Do you think that that is something that needs to be kind of scaled back a bit?
So I wasn't on social media. I
Oh,
probably
you
don't
missed
go
some
that
stuff.
far, yeah. You know, I think that's a personal decision somebody has to make. And as someone who has worked with candidates, there's a lot of things that we look at and say, okay, let's steer clear of this. This may not be something we want to get involved in. You know, there's a lot to be gained or lost by a sitting elected official getting involved in another race. And so I really, you know, I can't say whether it was good or bad. I'm
Yeah.
not sure. I think the candidate or the elected official has to take into consideration, you know, how is this going to help me? How is this going to hurt me? I certainly believe that everybody's entitled to say what they think and to endorse. I think people should be out telling other people. A lot of voters are uneducated, so I think it's important that, you know, I'm out and in a way that's not, you know, beating people down that you've got to do this, you got to do that. But, you know, I have people ask me questions about races, and as the chair of the county committee in Washington County, there's a lot of races, especially in the primaries. When there's a contested race, I can't really comment on, so I don't get involved in those. Sometimes I'm thankful for that. There's a lot of times that I'm thankful that I don't have to get involved or can't get involved. But when it comes to like a general election or nonpartisan races on the ballot, you know, people oftentimes ask, you know, kind of my thoughts. And I think it's important that I help people understand that may not. I do this. This is my job. I do this day in, day out. You do this day in, day out. We have our pulse on the political landscape with what we do, so we see all this, but a lot of people don't, and a lot of people don't want to see it. I mean, it's like they're like, I'm just so tired of hearing this stuff, and I don't blame them because there's always something, and we see this. This has gotten really bad from the federal level, and it's trickled down, and I don't know that there's fighting locally. But I think from a federal standpoint, people see what's going on in DC and the fights, and they're just like, I want to be done with all of it. And you know, at times I can't blame them for that, which is why I think it's important then that we get out and educate voters on the local issues and what's really affecting us, and not necessarily the Kabuki Theater in DC, which is what we see a lot.
Yeah, I agree. So how do you reconcile that then in the upcoming summer meeting? One of the proposed rules changes is the do not recommend resolution. And that has been a tool for several years now,
Right.
For county committees to be able to use in the primaries.
Right.
And so this would essentially take that tool away for these county committees on the House and Senate level when it's dealing with legislators. They can do, you know, pass do not recommend for a JP position. How often does that happen? Probably not that much.
Right.
It's more about their lawmakers. So tell us your thoughts about that rules change.
So I do not recall when this rule was added to the rules, and so I can't speak, but I've heard people that have been around a lot longer who kind of talk about what the intent might have been at that time. And the gist of what I'm getting is, well, the intent was this, the intent was that, and I don't deny that. As a lawyer, I can tell you that, you know, unless a law is ambiguous, we don't look to its intent. And I don't find this rule to be too very ambiguous. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. Here's how you don't recommend somebody. So it's kind of hard to say, well, the intent was different. And so I can understand why people have an issue with, well, if that was the intent, they should have written that in. I mean, that's what I always tell. I mean, I do this with the quorum court. If this is what you mean, then let's go ahead and put it in there to say that so that somebody's not guessing later. So I understand that. I think that the counties should have the ability to kind of make their voices heard, but I think that's got to be a really high bar. And here's why. You know, let's take a local House race that we have here where the member of the House, half of their districts in Washington County and half of their districts in Benton County. And we've got candidate A is from Washington County and a member of the Washington County Committee. And candidate B is a member of Benton County and is a member of the Benton County Committee. And there's a lot of history, and people can tell you there's always been this competition between Washington and Benton County here in Northwest Arkansas. I know, right? Barbara Tillman and I would both agree. We talk about that and kind of laugh, about trying to kind of tamper that down a little bit and do more working together.
Yeah.
But with that being said, I can see a situation where one of those county committees does a do not recommend against the other county's candidate. I don't know that that's what the county committees need to be doing, right? I don't know that that's the best use of putting our voice out there for our people. I mean, all things considered, that the same candidate, one lives in one county, one lives in the other, then it becomes more of a popularity contest. And so I can see where something like that would be an issue. So I kind of understand the idea behind the rules change and saying, hey, if it's a local, it's yours. If it's not, we need to do that on the state party level. So
But is that, but that legislator, is that not their local voice too at the Capitol? I mean, they don't have anyone else there to say we recommend or don't recommend. I mean, that's their local voice.
Right. And so, my point being that in order to do something like that, I think you have to set the bar high. And I'll tell you, the way I read the current rule is it takes 2/3 vote of the membership of the county committee at a regular meeting, which is different than in the rules that says it takes this much of a vote of the members present at a meeting. I think the rule was clear that it was the entire membership. It wasn't just the members present at a meeting. And I think it's clear that it has to be at a regular meeting and not a special called meeting. In other words, I, as the county chair, can't call a meeting during spring break when I know that all of my committee is going to be gone, except for a few that I agree with, and we're going to pass something real fast because somebody's not there.
Yeah.
So, I say that to say I'm not saying one side or the other is right more so than the other. I think there are good valid arguments on both sides. And I think ultimately we do what we're doing here, which is to say we give it to the delegates, to the members of the Republican Party and say, is this something we want to change or we want to keep it? And then we vote on that and that's where we go with it. So I can see pros and cons on both sides of it.
Yeah, but I guess I think this proposed rules change, and some people would say this appears to be another way that when we talk about local control, they say that all the time. Well, it's about, local control or having it at the very local level. But some would say, well, this proposed rules change is completely antithetical to that. It's taking away it's taking away our local voice in speaking into these races, but yet elected officials can do it as much as they please. And in the rules change, it says that they want to trust the voters to make determinations on who our nominees will be and should only ever issue such a designation in extreme circumstances, and that the executive committee should not be opining. And so to me, it's just like, well, which is it? We shouldn't be interfering, we shouldn't be opining, or we should, but it should only be elected officials who do it. That's how some would appear, it appears.
This is saying a whole group of people all agree or all have this point versus an elected official. And so I would say there's a lot of difference there. An elected official can go out, I can go out as the elected chairman pursuant to the rules and give my opinion, but I don't speak on behalf of the county committee. I'm not here today on behalf of the Washington County Committee or the Washington County or the county judge or the court or anything. I'm here as an individual, as any other individual voter to give my opinion. So I'm not here to speak on behalf of that. And so elected officials don't speak on behalf of our parties either. If the governor or the lieutenant governor or the attorney general want to go out and give their opinion on something, they're not out speaking on behalf of the RPA. Now they may be elected to some of the highest offices and it can be inferred that they are, but they aren't out there. This is saying we as a group, we as this entire group this is what we agree. And so I think that to do that, I think the groups should be able to do that, but I think you've got to have a higher bar than just 50+1, right?
So you would say, you know what, allow county committees to continue to do this, pass do not recommend on races that involve House and Senate. That would be okay as long as, say, the threshold was raised.
Yes, I personally would not have as much of an issue with it if the threshold was high for them to weigh in on races. And one of the reasons is we have to be careful as a party that we start putting the cart before the horse, okay? It wasn't that long ago that we weren't winning any races.
Yeah.
And we've come to this, we're at this place now where we have this comfort, this luxury that we can now fight with ourselves instead of having to fight against the other side as much. I think in order to keep from disenfranchising voters even more, we should stay away. You know, the county committee should really stay away from these, just because we may prefer candidate A over candidate B. We should never use not recommend. I mean, to me, this is something we should say, okay, there's a really good reason. You know, this candidate has done these things, and therefore morally, ethically, on the basis of, you know, that what they do, they clearly are acting in contrary to what we believe and where we are, and therefore we have to stand up for that and let people know. We're starting to see this a lot with people that are kind of coming over and crossing over into, you know, when you can only get elected as a Republican, then everybody's going to run as a Republican. And so we've got to start vetting those things out. But more than just putting out a blanket statement as a county committee, we should be out there educating voters. Our members should be out educating voters. I'll be real honest with you. I don't think that many people pay attention to what the county committees do. I really don't. I don't think that if Washington County Committee puts out a do not recommend, there are very few people who are going to know that.
Look at, you know, Womack, Washington County and Benton County both passed a resolution regarding Speaker of the House, and just kind of thumbed his nose at it. And, you know, I mean, I think that there probably are instances where it's not as impactful, but then you can look at other counties where Izzard and Independence in the James Sturch race, his record was terrible. And they worked really hard. They passed that do not recommend, and then they worked really hard to unseat him. And then they got Peyton in that seat. Is that right? Yeah, Peyton.
Yeah.
And so I think that there can be times when it is effective. It's just.
I believe that I think you are much more effective if your county committee members are going out and they're going door to door and they're campaigning for a particular candidate over another candidate. Far more effective than putting out a statement of do not recommend.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And you're right. You know, resolutions were passed saying, hey, here's who we think you should vote for speaker. They're not binding. These aren't binding either. It's not, you know, we're not binding people to do something. It's just saying this is our position. And, you know, I know this is probably not a popular opinion, but when we look at somebody like a congressman, and we say, well, this is what the county committee wanted, we make up a very small percentage of the people that vote for that congressman or congresswoman, depending on who it may be. So if we take Steve Womack for an example, we are a very, very small group of people that elect him to get into that office. And I think we have to understand that too. We're not, you know, until we get to the point that we're out and we're filling all 997 seats in our county committee, and we are that strong presence, it is what it is. I mean, if I'm in his seat and I'm an elected official, I realize that I hear you, but there may be other people that are also speaking. And I'm not taking a side. I'm just saying we can't lose sight of the fact that, you know, we're not here to call the shots. We're here to advocate and to elect our representatives and to make our voices be known. But that doesn't mean that somebody has to listen to us. The voters don't have to listen to us just because we pass a do not recommend. The voters don't have to listen to the RPA if it passes a do not recommend.
No, but the elected officials are there to be our voice. And when they clearly are not doing that any longer and representing we the people, then what?
And I don't disagree.
Yeah.
But to play a little bit of devil's advocate with you, and again, that's what we elect them for, is to do that. But just because they're not listening to my voice doesn't mean they're not listening to your voice, right? So if you and I disagree on something and I'm saying, hey, you need to vote for A, and you're going, hey, you need to vote for B, and they vote for B, I can't then get mad and say, you didn't listen to my voice. Well, you didn't, but I wasn't the only voice in the room.
Yeah, I think it's whenever, like what we're seeing, not just here in Arkansas, but nationally. I was listening to a podcast, what's going on in Michigan. There's this overwhelming movement of grassroots organizations and the Patriot movement, and where they are infiltrating, they're taking up seats, they're, you know, And it reminds me of the Tea Party movement in some sense, but I think it's more effective because nationally, we look at the RNC, able to get rid of Rona, put in more America First type leadership. And so I think conservatives, patriots want to see those elected officials in office that are there representing us actually listening to the people, because there are some representatives who, it's not even that we have some great congressmen. I think Westerman does a wonderful job, and a few others, but for instance, like Womack, so many people felt as though he really just did not listen to his base any longer.
Right.
And, so at what point do we say, okay, well, we need to do something different?
Well, I think we do that every time we go to the polls.
Yes.
And so, I mean, we can say that he didn't listen to his base, and you and I can say that we can sit here and say, okay, we agree that he didn't listen to his base, as an example. But then when we go to the polls, it doesn't necessarily show that.
Yeah.
Okay, so not everybody felt that disenfranchised with that candidate. So I'm just saying we have to be careful because we often feel like we speak for the voter base. Well, maybe we don't. Maybe the voter base doesn't agree with us. Maybe we are the minority, even though we feel like we're the majority. That makes sense?
It makes sense.
And it's not what any of us want to hear in politics, but it's the reality.
Yeah.
Maybe we aren't the majority. So what do you do? The question is, well, what do you do?
Well, I hope that people who believe that you just simply, conserve the Constitution and follow the platform and principles, I hope that conservative Republicans, that those who believe that, are not in the minority. Because if we are in the minority, then our party is in a really big problem.
I don't think we're in the minority.
Okay.
I think what it comes down to is who gets to determine what that line is. Okay. If you go through and you look at the Republican Party platform, it says we believe in this and we believe in that. And it's not a hard line, black and white. We believe that you have to vote yes on every government limitation and no on every tax increase. That's not what the party platform says. And so it gets to the point where we've all got to make those determinations. And I've said this to a lot of people, and I'm going to say this now to you. We as Republicans throw around this term rhino, and I think that we've got to stop. And the reason I have to stop is who gets to determine what a rhino is? Is it me? Is it you?
Well, would it be someone like Womack who continues to vote for the omnibus bills and sides more with, would it be someone like that? At what point do we say, okay, they clearly are not aligned with, look at their voting record.
That to me, but I don't. I don't think that's it, because we take and we pick apart very small part. We focus in on these issues that are key to us on these votes. And I've said this for a long time. One, I wish Congress had the same rule that the Washington County Quorum Court has, and basically the state legislature has, which is one bill, one idea.
Yes.
Right? Then we know.
Sure.
But when we get to the federal government, Congress, it's everything gets thrown in to the point that none of us like it. Republicans don't like it for the most part. But it's not changing. It's not changed. It's not where we want it to be. So I think that we oftentimes look at these big bills and there's a lot packed into them, and we key in on one or two things instead of looking at all 6 million that are involved, because it seems like there's just an ungodly number in all these. And start looking at where somebody is. And so, yes, it becomes is everything that this particular elected official doing goes absolutely against the party? No. Well, then they're not really a rhino, because rhino implies that they only are running with an R on their name, but they're voting as a D in every single category. And so what we've got to the point where we use that to hurt our own as a matter of trying to get them out of office. That's where I want to caution people.
Yeah.
That's where I want to caution people. When you start doing that, the use of a term or a phrase like that becomes less effective. People stop listening. And two, you're kind of putting out, it's basically saying, hey, I'm going to do all that I can to get rid of you because you don't do every single thing that I want. Well, let's talk about all those things. Those guys that go to Congress, they're dealing with a whole lot of stuff. And I'm not giving shade to anybody, but I'm saying that I think that we all have to be a little bit more reasonable and think a little bit more about everything going on. So what happens when we get somebody who we don't feel like is hearing our voice? Well, then we exercise that right in the primaries to go out to either run as a candidate, to support a candidate, to help somebody else that we think would do a better job and more aligns with us. And that's what we do. And
Do
then
you
we have a
think-
primary.
Yeah. So with the primary and electing someone I guess it was last year or at a recent, and correct me, executive committee, I think it was executive committee that voted to raise the congressional fee from 15 to 30, and that only affected one race.
In that particular
year.
Right.
And I've heard from others who have been in leadership, they're like, I would have raised the presidential nominate, that race because they have the funds. So yes, the point is then okay, if we don't like the fact that these legislators, you look at Club for Growth or you look at other, scorecards and they have Ds and Fs. And so it's time to reelect someone else. But then you have, say, new hurdles like a $30,000 filing fee, and you have, war chests of, the Waltons and everyone in your pocket. How do you overcome that?
Well, that's a good question. I think that's the ultimate question that a lot of candidates who are not incumbents are asking themselves. How do we overcome this? And I think that what happens is eventually, if you have an incumbent in that position that is that unpopular, the money won't matter. Don't get me wrong, the money matters a lot in elections and you can get your message out a lot easier. But if you have a candidate that is that unpopular, and it's happened, we've watched this happen, not necessarily here in Arkansas, but around the nation, we've watched candidates who are longtime incumbents who are unseated by somebody like somebody that you're not really heard of because they're that unpopular. And so, yes, the money thing is a difficult thing.
Yeah.
I know there's been a lot of talk about the raising of the filing fees. I'm not on the exec committee. I wasn't a part of any of that. I will say, some people watching and some people in other parts of the states, if they learned what our filing fee is for our local county judge, for our local county executive officials, would go, oh my gosh, that's outrageously expensive. We have that luxury of having it because we have a lot of candidates, because we're very active, because we're doing very well. I don't think that's outside the realm of possibilities. Yeah. Sure, it's high. In those races, I think if you talk to anybody, and I've talked to quite a few different political advisors, and in those races, they will tell you, if you can't raise money like that, even for our local races, it's only, say it's $6,000. If you can't raise $6,000 filing fee, you probably shouldn't be running.
Yeah.
And so certainly I hear what's going on.
I'm sure you do.
I understand that it affected one race this time. It'll affect different races as it goes on. And that's something that as a party, we can say, okay, did we make a good decision here or not? And if we look at it and say, this was really a bad decision, well, we go back in and we change it.
Yeah. Something else that I want to ask if you think it affected the race or not is closing the primaries across the country in those races where you talk about that they have unseated an incumbent. A lot of those have closed primaries. We do not. This issue has been brought up several times at state level, and it continues to get voted down. I know that you did vote against closing the primaries. And I couldn't help but think turnout was so low. The margin between the two in that congressional race was small. And we know in 2022 that the Democrats were openly encouraging their voters to cross over in 2022. I have seen on Twitter that again saying, I cast my vote for this person in the Republican primary, to swing that. And so I couldn't help but think, okay, would that race or other races have looked differently had we closed our primaries? And what will it take for Arkansas to get there?
Sure. And I'm glad you brought this up. You are right. I was one of the people at the last state party meeting that voted against the closed primary. I'm not against closed primaries. I have probably a luxury that a lot of people may not have, which is really seeing firsthand what we call unintended consequences when we start passing laws and start getting into things. I write all the laws for the quorum court. I go in and I try to be as methodical as I can at expressing their idea in whatever we write, so that we don't have this issue of, oh gosh, we didn't think about this and we didn't think about that. Those things happen. That's always something that you've got to worry about, and it will always happen. You can't come up with every scenario before you vote on something, right? So you've got to understand, but you can do all that you can of those issues that are in front of you to ensure that you've addressed each one of them. I think that closed primaries is something we've got to start looking at. We've got to. But I think that we've got to do this. We've got to be very methodical in what we do, because as you and I just got done talking about disenfranchising voters, you can go about this, you can pass a law that has the unintended consequence of disenfranchising even more voters. You're pushing even more voters out because they feel like, well, I didn't realize that you had to do this. You hear horror stories. I just read one within the last week of somebody who kind of got pushed out of voting in a Republican primary in another state. And the only option they were given were like independent or something, Democrat, all these different Democrats. And they're like, I've always been a Republican voter. It's like, well, but you had to go back to the DMV, not, here. I think that we need to do something. We need to address this.
Okay.
We need to address it in a way that we aren't, excluding people who exercise that right. And I'm gonna be real honest. My parents are both conservative. Never been a member of a party. Probably parents were probably old yellow dog Democrats back in the day. But they are very conservative, but they're not going to get involved with the party and with what goes on. I would hate for us to have an election, and I would really hate if I was on the ballot in that election and they couldn't go vote for me because they didn't go to the DMV, someplace they don't ever go, and change something because they didn't realize they had to. You get what I'm saying?
I do.
So I think that
and I heard that argument at the summer meeting.
And I think we can overcome that. I think we can overcome that in a lot of different ways. We've got to figure out, so at what point is the cutoff for allowing somebody to pick? Because if you say, well, when you go in, you can pick. Well, then are we really stopping anything?
Yeah.
Because if I can just go in every time I vote and change my political party preference, then we're not doing any good.
Sure.
So we've got to do something a little bit more than that. Well, there are going to be people that are going to be caught off guard by whatever that cutoff is to get those things changed. So one thing that we have to do, instead of rushing into something, I think we've got to really think about, we've got to have enough time to educate voters. I'm a fan of saying we do this and we require the Secretary of State to send something out to every voter that says, hey, the law has changed. Here is what you have to do. Here are even in that, though, we know that we're going to miss some people, right? But I think we've got to do our due diligence to help everybody out in that case. There will be some growing pains with it initially. People will pick up on it as time goes on. I felt like at the last meeting when we talked about this, a lot of it was just knee jerk and it hadn't been thought out. And I can't support something, even though I support it, I can't support putting forward something that has not been thoroughly vetted and that we're just kind of a knee jerk reaction to. Trust me, I've had knee-jerk reactions to a lot of things in my life, and I've been wrong most of the time when I've done it. And I'm fortunate to have a wonderful wife who talks me down.
He is wonderful.
And wonderful people who say, now, Brian, hold on. Before. And this happened this week with something.
Yeah.
And I got very upset, and I had to have somebody say, wait a minute, but you don't know the whole story. So before you get really mad, let me explain to you kind of some background. And absolutely, in that conversation, I said, man, I'm glad you told me this because absolutely, I didn't see it that way, and I didn't realize all this. I was just having this gut reaction.
So you think that because the majority so at that meeting, majority are elected officials, the governor, the majority of those people all voted against closing their primaries. I know that you can't speak for them, but it was surprising to me to see so many elected officials, along with our governor, vote against closing our primaries. And so in your opinion, do you think it was just because it was such a knee-jerk reaction and that it is something that overall the party does want to do, it just wasn't the right time?
I would hope so.
I do too.
And here's the thing, until you said that, I don't remember what the governor voted in that. I wasn't sitting next to her. We do the thing where you stand up and sit down, and I vote for me. I'm not gonna lie. Brenda will be happy to vouch for that. I will vote for me in what I believe. And it's not really about what anyone else has told me or anything like that, because I've got to think about, how it affects me, how it affects my kids, where I
Mhm.
think we're going. And I really couldn't tell you how anybody else in that
Mhm.
room voted on that issue, but I knew I voted against it for
Mhm.
that reason.
Mhm.
I hope that that was the reason that other people voted against it, or a large majority of them. I hope that, because I do see that closed primaries probably seem to be where we're going, and that we need to consider this. And so I'm all in favor of getting together and us coming up with something
Yeah.
that where we really dig into this and make sure that we're taking care of hitting all these, so we don't. The worst case scenario for me is that we jump out and we do something that hurts us, and all of a sudden we give all of our political power back to the left in the
Mhm.
state of Arkansas
Mhm.
because we jumped out and did something and didn't think it through.
Well, yeah, and some of
That's
those voters, we may lose some Republicans as disenfranchised voters in that shuffle. Some Democrats may be those disenfranchised
and they
voters
make, yeah,
as
absolutely.
well that we'd also be weeding out.
Sure. I don't disagree. And you're going to have some collateral damage anytime you pass a bill. We can talk about the LEARNS Act that the governor and the legislature passed. And I know you and I both probably would agree that we thought that was a great
Yeah.
bill, and we were very happy. There was collateral damage with
Mhm.
that.
Mhm.
There were well-to-do, well-meaning, good people that it didn't affect the way that we probably would have liked
Yeah.
it to. That's going to happen. People that are for it, it's not going to, it's not going to affect the right way initially. So we understand, we've got to understand that that's going to happen. But we also have to make sure that we're doing our part to try to minimize that as much as we can. And we can work on getting those
Yeah.
people back.
So what I'm hearing is the work needs to start now.
That's
If we've got
exactly
to have
right.
this campaign roll out, if we've got to have, the Secretary of State send something out, really, you know what? Can you call and see if they can amend the
The agenda,
agenda and let's add it on there?
I think we're beyond, unfortunately. I'm a rules guy too, don't get me wrong.
No,
I'm
I
the
think,
rules guy.
well,
So we got to follow the rules and the process,
is
but
it,
it's certainly something we can do. I wouldn't want
yeah,
to put something out. I mean, even though we're talking about a meeting, our state meetings in May,
yeah,
I don't know that that's enough time for us to really do something. If there's
yeah,
something this big, this is going
yeah,
to be huge.
yeah,
And so I've got something I'm working on at the county right now. We've been talking about for years. And it's a comprehensive change in a policy that we've had that we're going to roll out eventually. But it's something that we are slow walking because we want to make sure that we don't miss something. We know we're going to miss some things, but we want to make sure that we don't just throw something out that then becomes more problematic than it is beneficial for the people of Washington County. I'm the same way with this.
okay.
I want to do it. I want to, but I want to make sure that we don't rush into it.
Let's see, another thing that, has been proposed, this was, and I believe you spoke to this one as well, adding a member to the executive committee. This would have been, something that the chairman, regardless of who it is, the chairman would appoint someone. It would create a new position to the exec committee, and then that chairman would be able to appoint who that person is. Do you remember that?
I don't,
Okay.
honestly.
Okay, that's okay. And there was just a lot of conversation about that
Mhm.
and whether or not that continues to kind of consolidate power on that state level rather than, because there's already a lot of positions, exec positions that the chairman appoints. And so yet adding another new position that chairman, whomever it may be, also then appoints, is that what's best, or is it something that we need to, again, go back to the county levels and let the counties choose and appoint? What are your thoughts on that?
We have a representative style government. Our structure in the Republican Party is a representative style. We elect people. Obviously not everybody can go down and do this. There's a reason we do that. I think that the founding fathers, who, if you look back at what they did when they wrote our Constitution, they created our government. First off, I'm going, man, these guys were brilliant back then. I mean, more stuff that it's just kind of hard to comprehend. The things they foresaw coming that have happened now, and we've benefited from that. I think that we elect representatives, and we've got to trust that that's who's going to lead and who's going to run the things. I probably have a different perspective than some people from working within government in the executive branch of government exactly, and working alongside the legislative and judicial branch. Everybody's experience is a little bit different. But I think that we elect a chairman, and the job of the chairman is to appoint these people in these positions to work within the goals and the vision that the chairman has for their time in office. I respect that. I respect that office, just like I respect it with the county judge. I respect it with the governor. They've got a mission, they've got values, they've got goals. Those are the things that are going on. If you start interjecting too many people into that organization or that structure that don't adequately reflect that leader, then you're going to have a hard time meeting those goals and doing things like that. So I don't know. I think it's just something we'd have to take up on a case-by-case basis. But I certainly, clearly I support the current RPA chairman. I worked for him for a long time. I have a lot of respect and admiration for Joseph Wood. And I think that I can tell you he is probably one of the most upstanding Christian men I've ever met. And he lives out his faith daily. And so I have a lot of trust in him. I can also tell you from working with Joseph that he and I didn't always agree on things. Absolutely, we did not agree on things, and we could talk about that and go forward. And ultimately, he's the boss, and we do that. And so it's not just like a blank check of everything's right. But I think that we get into this position of we may not like the outcome of something, so let's start scaling back something. And I think we've got to be careful. Again, I think that's something that in any organization you've got to be careful.
Well, I think this one specifically wasn't scaling anything back. So it wasn't taking any power away from the chairman. It was giving the chairman more power, creating a new seat. And it wasn't even mentioned in the proposed rules change. Well, who's going to appoint? How does that person then even get into that chair? Well, or into that position? Well, the chairman will appoint it. And so I think that there was, when there's this conversation right now, and I wanted to ask you about this kind of in our state party about the consolidation of power versus, no, we don't want things to trickle, down, it should be at the local level. That gave the impression that, it gives more power at the top rather than it being about local control.
It's a good question. I think we could sit here and talk about theoreticals day in, day out, all day that we're sitting here and come up with our ideas. I'll say this. The chair of the Republican Party of Arkansas is ultimately responsible for fundraising. I mean, that's their number one goal, is fundraising. We've got to give that chair, whoever it is, the ability to do that and however they see fit. And I think that, when we start talking about interjecting too much other people from other areas, I think we start to dilute their ability to do the one thing that they're actually called to do more than anything, which is to fundraise. I mean, that is ultimately what our chairman does.
Yeah, and I know that I don't think that you are implying it this way, but it sounds as though the chairman, and again, I have so much respect for Joseph Wood, and he's been so kind to come in here before when he was county judge, and I've asked him to come on as chairman. I hope he's declined, but I hope he will at some point. But it's almost as if, well, the chairman kind of acts as a power broker, and rather than having more voice, more say locally with the people, it's more about managing power and then making sure the pieces of the puzzle, whether it's fundraising, whether it's appointments, whether it's primary season, whatever it may be, making sure that that's consolidated and contained rather than allowing the people to work. And I may have it wrong.
Well, no, I mean, I get what you're saying, but I also say that there's a lot that goes on that I don't have the capacity, even as the county chair of Washington County Committee, I don't have the capacity to get into the weeds of what's going on at the RPA. I've got all the other things in my life that are going on. So I have to trust that whoever the group elects, regardless of who that is, that they can take and they can do those tests. And so I'm not real interested, I guess, in talking about adding more local, hands in the pot, because I think we do that by electing. I think it's just like the president. I'm not going to sit here and say, well, let's take the FBI away from the president. Let's
Yeah.
take this away from the president. No, that's what their job is. I'm here to elect who I think should be our commander in chief, and then it's their job to run those departments. I don't think that, so I don't know if we're on like a different, talking about something a little bit different, but
kind of, but again, and I think that was the crux of that argument. Well, people kept saying, well, you're trying to take party away from the chairman or power away from the chairman. No, this is a brand new position. This is a brand new position that's going to be created by the chairman, that is then appointed by the chairman. And so I think optically, what message does that send to county committees when these executive committees are already stacked by, and I understand, I completely agree with you in a lot of ways about, at some point we have to, trust those that are elected, but when it's fully stacked that way, but it's supposed to be a representation, what does that look like? So.
Well, I mean, I think again, we are arguing about how much local control should be enough local control, right? It's all local control. And the reason I say that is we get to exercise, our chairman is not appointed. No one appoints the chairman to the RPA. The governor can weigh in, the lieutenant governor, the attorney general, our congressional members of Congress, our federal delegation can weigh in. None of them get to appoint that position. Ultimately, the members of the group get to elect that position. And so it's all local control, because this is the voice of the majority of the group as to what they want. Now, if I go and I listen to what someone else tells me and I, make my decision based on that, well, so be it. That's elections. That's elections 101, right? That's what we do every time we go out and knock on a door for a candidate and say, hey, Joe Smith right here is running and they're a great candidate and here's all the good things about them. And I want you to listen to me and exercise your vote by doing what I say. And then that person does it and we say, oh, that's a win because we were able to get that voter to come in. It's no different in this. Ultimately, though, it's that voter that gets to take their life experiences and what they know. They get to discern through all the information that they're getting to go in and make that decision. I do the same thing when I go and vote, as my part of my duty as a member of the RPA. I take into consideration what's being proposed. I think about how it's going to affect me locally. I think about what my county committee may want, what their desires will be. And ultimately, all those things factor into, this is the decision that I've made. And I think that the members of the county committee would say, and we elect Brian to be our chair to go and do those things. We're not going to weigh into that because that's what we elect a chairman for, a state committee man, a state committee woman. These are the things that we're doing. When we elect these people, we want to know, what is your philosophy? What are your thoughts? I mean, we've got that coming up. We've got the issue of a new state committee man, state committee woman in Washington County, and it's both of those races are contested. And I think that it's right that people call or talk to the candidates and say, hey, tell me about this, tell me about that. Then they go and they make their decision. And then whether I agree with what the state committee man or the state committee woman how they may vote at a meeting, it's up to them. It's not up to me. I don't get the power to say, hey, no, you've got to vote this way and this way because I say so. No, you were elected by the people too. And so you may have a different take. I respect that. That's just who we are. I don't think negatively of somebody because they may disagree with me. I just say, hey, you and I saw it differently. I can sit and argue with you why I think I'm right and you're wrong.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it is absolutely your decision. I don't get to wield any of that over you.
As you were speaking, I was thinking about that state committee meeting, and you got up and spoke, and something that struck me.
Were you there?
I
You might have
watched
been.
it. I watched. Wait,
Okay.
I'm sorry. At the summer meeting, I'm thinking of it was a December meeting. Sometimes they all are
No,
like
I'm
a blur.
I asked
I was
because I
there.
don't remember who,
I was.
I never think about who all was there.
I was.
So that's
I
why
was
I'm
there.
like, if you were there, I don't even remember that. But
it was packed. The summer one, the December one. I think it was the December one.
Was that the one at the RPA?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, that one was packed too, but it was a much smaller space.
It was. And that one had a different vibe.
Yep.
Felt a little more contentious, kind of, very disgruntled. I didn't love that. But at one point, whenever you spoke, and I think you were speaking against, Brian, I can't believe you don't remember this because you were speaking against adding the member. That's what it was, I believe, wasn't it?
It might, you're
Yeah,
probably right. I
It
don't-
was. And
I
at
don't
one
know what
point,
that goes on.
no, I know. At one point you said, because you were kind of talking about what we're talking about right now,
Mhm,
and then you said, we are the establishment now.
mhm.
What, and I was like, what does Brian mean by that?
Sure.
And I wrote it down. I was like, I want to ask you, whenever you said we're the establishment now, and I think a lot of people hear the word establishment, and it's not always the first thought that pops up in their mind is not a positive one.
Mhm.
So help us understand what you meant by that.
I do remember that.
Yeah.
And in that particular case, I was talking directly to Joe Maynard.
Okay.
And I said, Joe, you are the establishment.
Why do you say that?
My point is this, because this goes back to the whole rhino thing.
Mhm.
We like to use these buzz terms, these buzzwords to really rile people up. And in doing so, we throw out rhino, we throw out establishment like it's something bad. And we want it to have a bad connotation. So we're going to say, well, that's the establishment. And I hear Tucker Carlson coming out in me when I say things like that, because he's always making fun of people who use these terms, and he's right. To hear somebody like Joe say, well, the establishment. Well, Joe, you are the establishment. The establishment are the people that are on this committee. This is the establishment. We that are involved are the establishment. We've got to stop telling people that it's something bad. If I'm a member of my county committee and I'm a member of the state party and I'm going and exercising my right to do that, and I'm trying to get elected to go to the RNC, that is the essence, that's the establishment. What else would be the establishment if that's not the establishment, right? So we got to stop telling people that. We've got to stop throwing that out like that's a cuss word. We don't have to all agree. And I'm good with that. But and hopefully we're kind of getting back to this whole party unity thing. In order to have more success as a party, we have really got to humble ourselves, I think, Republicans, across the board.
Okay.
We have to humble ourselves and we have to get back to this level of more civility. And I'm not by any means insinuating that everybody has to, lockstep, rank and file, go with what we're told to go with. I don't agree with that. That's not at all. We as Republicans, one of the things that I think we enjoy more so than the other side, than the liberals and the left and the Democrats, is we're much more likely to engage in these debates. Sometimes I think that we let our debates and our differences continue on past the point of it being beneficial, right? Primary elections are when we get to say, I disagree with my elected official, or I want something new, and I'm gonna fight I'm gonna put time in, I'm gonna support this candidate over that candidate for this reason, and I'm gonna go out and I'm gonna do all that I can. And I think that is absolutely great. That's the process. That's what we should do. When the primary's in and the voters have spoken as to who their candidate is going to be, because that's just my opinion or your opinion, or maybe you and I both because we agree. Ultimately, we have to then take a step back and say, okay, we're once again all on the same team. And I'll take the local Clint Penzo, Steve Womack race. And there were, as you can tell, based on the numbers, it was a big split within the party. We're to the point now that we've got to step back and say, okay, whether we wanted our candidate won or not, we're all back on the same team. Whether we agree 100% with everything that goes on or not, we're still on the same team. And I'll look at that, because if we don't do a better job of working together as a team, we're going to let go what we have. And I think that as much as anybody can be upset with how this or that elected official, and I'm not talking about any specific race right now, as much as we can get upset with how they vote. And I'll tell you, I sit and watch the quorum court, and Republican members of the quorum court vote, and I'm like, what are you thinking? But I still have to say, but the alternative here could be a whole lot worse.
I agree.
And so my job is to pull somebody like that I know aside to say, hey, what was that vote for? What helped you come? Next time, talk to me. Maybe I realize maybe I should have reached out to somebody beforehand and said, hey, here's kind of where I am. Or maybe we should have talked about this in a committee meeting and you gotten more input. but ultimately they get to do what they do. But it doesn't mean that I'm gonna, it doesn't mean that I then have to just go and trash them and run them down, because we are still on the same side.
I agree with that. And I think you can even look at the national landscape and think, okay, very split between Nikki Haley and Trump. And the conversation still is, well, is Haley, are Haley's voters and, all 10 of her, supporters going to get out and vote for Trump in November? We all need to be on the same. I totally agree with that. I think as far as just the contentiousness of the party at times, for instance, like that December meeting, I was watching live. I literally could hear people saying, sit down,
Oh, yeah.
Some at Brenda, some at Joe, some other people that I knew.
Some at me, sure.
Some probably at you. And I just had not witnessed that before. And I thought, man, we can do so much better. But what does that look like? So if you have voters who say members who, whether it's delegates who were never seated, go back to 2022. Was it 2022? Yeah, it was after COVID. Pulaski County delegates weren't seated. That was a big deal. Other counties who have just felt like their voices aren't heard, or they're coming up against roadblocks, whatever it may be, because they're part of this, there for a while, MAGA was a bad word, but now that it seems like Trump is, being endorsed and supported again here in our state on the executive level, it's fine now if they're MAGA Republicans. But there for a while, these right-wing MAGA Republicans were not really welcome. And so how do we bring in, you talk about, humbling yourself across the entire, on both sides. What does that look like? And that would also speak, though, to those who are in a position of power right now, who may not like that MAGA Republican who's ultra white right wing, but they need to, what do they do with that?
Well, I think that we've got to stop fighting within ourselves. I think one of the main things we do is we all sit back down and go, okay, let's refocus on what the goal is. Okay, because I think at the end of the day, the goal is the same for all of us. Okay. We've gotten to a point, and I see this at the Quorum Court. So I see this at the local legislative level, where it's become permissible and almost encouraged by some people to show up and yell. We've got to restore the decorum in meetings, every meeting, from a county committee meeting to we had you probably remember the issue with the Senator Flowers in the Senate meeting and all that. We've got it. All of us, we have a responsibility as people that represent other groups or a larger group of people to restore that decorum in what goes on. And so these meetings that you're talking about, and I don't know any of the specifics on the delegates that weren't seated and all that. We've got to get back to we're on the same team. We've got to make sure that we're following our rules. Our rules lay out how we do something. Whether I like the rule or not, it's the rule. And then we let the process work itself out. And if I'm on the losing side, well, then I accept that, you know what? The majority of the people here didn't agree with me. And I have to accept that. And I have to say, okay, is it so much of an issue that I step away from the organization because it's gone to a place where I can't continue? Or is it not? And I've just got to continue to work with everybody and, move forward in a way that continues to advance us towards whatever that goal is. And I think that as a party statewide with there has been a lot of contention. I think that that's one thing that we have got to do. And there's nothing that I can do or that you can do or that any other person can do. It's something that we as decent human beings have to reassess and say, you know what, maybe I was wrong. I got to lay this aside. We do this. This is Christianity 101, right? At some point you have to say, we disagreed, we had a disagreement, but at the end of the day, we're still on the same team. We still have got to work together. We can still be friends. We can disagree, and we can continue to move towards this one goal. And I really think about, Christianity comes into that because there's a whole lot of things out there about what the Bible says or what it's interpreted and how we do it. But at the end of the day, as Christians, we are called to love Jesus Christ and to show others the love of Jesus, right? Love your neighbor as yourself. That's it. We can put everything, all of the other hot topic button issues aside, because when we look at the core goal, that's it. And our lives should be lived out in a way that get us to that. And so we can disagree on the ancillary things, but it should never be to the point that our goal then is to attack somebody who is just trying to get to the same place that we are, right? And so I think that that's something that as a party, we need to all step back and say, okay, because, and here's the thing, the whole reason is we have a lot to lose. We have a whole lot to lose in the state of Arkansas. We don't want to get back to where that is because we destroyed ourselves from within. I can tell you, I can see, I've seen it on the left and I can see it on the right where the party starts this infighting. And it's like, just give them enough time, they'll just destroy themselves. We've got to be careful of that. That'll happen to us too. And so that's kind of where we are. Let's have our elections. Let's have election integrity. Let's make sure that we're following the rules. Let's make sure that every voice is heard that needs to be heard, that has a right to be heard. And then let's say, okay, this is what we do based on that. We're all here together and let's continue and let's stop this infighting that's going on. That's my thought on this whole unity of the party. It's an easy thing to say. It's like I say, it's a humbling thing because all of us have to admit, I have to admit that I've not taken the best tactic in doing this and I need to do better. And I'll be the first to admit that. I think that's something that we all have to do.
I'm going to cut that clip and I'm going to send it to I'm going to send it out to all the conservatives here in Arkansas.
Right, and say this is what we got to do.
That's what Brian said.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much for sticking around. Okay, a few other things I want to ask you. One, growing the party then. We're going to humble ourselves. We're going to get together. That doesn't mean that you agree with me and go along. We're going to all listen to one another. We're all going to come together. But then how do we grow it? What does that look like? Especially as we're moving towards, say, we've got some exciting stuff coming up in May and June, the RNC delegation, national coming up, and then November elections. There's a lot of things going on. We need to build momentum. We need to turn out the vote. What does that look like to you?
So I think that big part of growing the party is getting away from I think the infighting has a lot to do with people not wanting to get, and who wants to get, that's messy. Nobody needs any more mess in their life. We all have plenty of mess in our lives to then go out and say, I want to be a part of a group that's completely messy. So one of the things we've got to do in coming together is get rid of that and start encouraging people to come out and be a part of what we're doing and allow them to see the benefit that we have. Hey, don't just look at all the bad stuff. Take a look at the good. We are doing good stuff. I think as we do better, as we work harder, as long as we are tearing ourselves down, we are continuing to push people away. Okay, why would I want to come join this organization when there's all I hear is about all these horrible people that are a part of it? Well, we've got to stop doing that to ourselves in order to grow the party. I think that, as time goes on, and we saw this in the 2020 election, people get more involved as things get worse at the federal level. And I mean, my God, we are at an all-time low, in my opinion. I don't care what anybody says. We got a president in office who can't even put a sentence together unless he's doped up on steroids or something. I don't know how he got through the State of the Union. He can't remember anything. He bumbles. He walks like there's something like he's got like some sort of disability. I mean, I feel bad for the man almost. He is. And age, it doesn't even matter age. There's a lot of older people that are sharp as
they are. You're right.
He's not.
Yeah.
And so, and our lives are worse because of it. Your life is worse because of it with your family and having to buy groceries and things being so high. And I mean, my gosh, my wife and I just, went to the grocery store and bought groceries and we're like, we spent this much money and this is all we got.
Yeah.
We need people to realize that we need boots on the ground. Boots on the ground is what founded this country.
Mhm.
Boots on the ground is what will save this country and will keep us where we need to be. And those of us that are already in the trenches, we need to be going out, we need to go out and we need to encourage and do all that we can to encourage people to come join us and be those boots on the ground.
Yeah.
And so all of this stuff has to be taken into consideration. Yes, life is messy sometimes. Families are messy. We all know that,
Mhm.
right? Church is messy. Everything is messy. Let's not make a bigger mess out of something we don't have to. Let's all go out. Let's support our candidates. Let's get behind them. Let's go door to door and do for them. But when that primary is over, let's all regroup and say, okay, you know, you're not really my candidate B. I was for candidate A. But the alternative
Mhm.
is something that I'm not willing to even look at. I mean, you look at the quorum court, we've got people right now that believe that no one should be in jail.
Right.
I've
Yeah.
got children and I can tell you that that's not true.
Yeah.
If that's the alternative to somebody that doesn't always vote the way I want them to, but absolutely disagree, is like, no, we need jail. I'm for the guy that wants jails. I'm
Mhm.
for the guy that wants law and order, or the woman, whoever it is. I'm
Mhm.
against the person that says, oh no, we don't need it. We don't need that. We don't need police. We've got to be smarter about that. So
Mhm.
let's go out and then let's let our voices be heard to them. Let's make sure they're hearing from us. They
Mhm.
may not listen to us. And guess what? In the next election, once again, we find a candidate that we like that's better than them, and that's who we support. And we keep doing that. And we keep doing that. That's what we do. But we don't tear ourselves down. We don't tear the structure down and burn it down just because we didn't get what we want right here in this thing. That would be my message to everybody. And again, I'm not saying you have to agree with everything that someone does with whom you disagree. You don't just then have to lockstep and say, well, I support this person. No, not at all. But there's a way to go about doing things that isn't so detrimental to the main focus at the end.
That's great insight. Before I let you go,
Mhm.
the May meeting
The May meeting,
and then the June,
right? The
the
RPA.
RPA.
Okay.
Yep. Just briefly, for those who may not really be familiar with what's coming up, briefly tell us what's ahead.
So the May meeting of the RPA is a regular RPA committee meeting, and at that meeting, we will elect delegates to travel to the RNC, which is in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And so I don't have all those numbers, but I'm thinking it's probably going to look promising for a lot of people that want to go, that are going to get to go and be a part of that historic process. And so that is the meeting that we will elect those delegates. As we've talked about, there are a couple of proposed rule changes that will be taken up. They will be debated. They will be voted on. We'll make a decision as to what we want to do as a group, and we'll put that to rest. Then June is our state convention, and just like our county conventions, that's where we ratify the delegates. We ratify all the people that were elected in the primaries. It's just a process that we have to do. It's what our government's been doing for years and years and years and years. And then I guess technically you can have other rule changes that come about in that, and maybe we'll see some more proposed rule changes and that sort of thing. I don't really know of anything else real big that's on the horizon. But I know that meeting is in Benton County in Rogers,
Yeah.
the state convention, and I know that that's a point of contention.
I was going to ask you, what do you think about that? Do you think there's like two schools of thought? It's one, this is a strategic move, and that this is just another power play by the state party to disenfranchise those Patriot committee members who are usually down much further south, versus, no, this is a wonderful way to showcase other parts of our state. Rogers is beautiful. This area is growing. It's just nice to have a change.
So first off, I would say,
And also, I've heard also that Northwest Arkansas is consolidating power regarding, what we have here, and as far as appointments and whether it's on exec committee or whatever it may be. What do you say to those people who say that Northwest Arkansas is gaining too much power in the state party?
that's something that I think we've heard, not just within the RPA, we at a county level hear that all the time from legislators. The roads are paved in gold in Northwest Arkansas. Well, they're not. And things are expensive here, just
Home to
like
my
it is
parents'
everybody
county
else.
road.
That's right, exactly. That we don't need funding up there. They have plenty of funding. Here's what I have to say about all that. That's another one of those things that we've got to get away from. This idea that every decision made is made to somehow harm some particular person is unfounded. And unless there is proof of that, then let's not jump out there. And I say that from a place of personal experience recently with our local legislative body and us and an agenda not getting out when it, should have, or when it typically goes out. And then this idea that there was something nefarious going on. No, we are humans. There are reasons that things don't do or don't happen as they normally do. And most of the time it's because we are humans and things come up. When it comes to the state party meeting, I can certainly understand that a drive from the Delta all the way to Northwest Arkansas is a long drive. Personally, and I don't speak for anybody but myself, I like the idea of moving our state party meeting around the state, not just Northwest Arkansas. I'd love to go over to Northeast Arkansas. I'd love to go down to Southeast, Southwest, Hamburg. If there's a facility that can hold us, absolutely. I enjoy going. I drive through there headed down to like the beach when we go, and I enjoy stopping in some of these local restaurants. These like hole in the wall type places. I enjoy that. I enjoy seeing other parts of the states that other parts of the state that I don't always get to see. I grew up in the Texarkana area, and I would still be happy with going back down, to that part of the state as well. I love Northwest Arkansas. I came to college up here and I've stayed, and this is where my family is, and this is where I plan to be. So for all the naysayers, I would say, well, yeah, Northwest Arkansas, everything. We should move the capital up here, right? There was that rumor at one time. I'm kidding, but we have a lot of people. There are, I don't for a minute think that the Patriots in the Delta are any more patriotic than the Patriots in Northwest Arkansas. Okay, that's another one of those things we've got to kind of come back together. I don't know of any Republicans, and I'm not talking to anybody who is like, oh no, I'm absolutely against liberty and freedom and stuff like that. I think we're all for that. I know, but I'm saying, this idea that there's some sort of intentional effort to disenfranchise those people. Unless you can prove to me that is the case, I don't believe that to be the case.
I think it's just, some would say, when you look at things that have happened, say, in the past 2 years, let's just say to 2022, with the not seeing the delegates, and then just kind of seeing how things have been laid out, what proposed rules changes there have been, not letting people into county committees, those sort of things. One time is a coincidence, but then when things continue to add up, that, then they're like, man, like, do they not want us involved in the party?
I feel like having things in Little Rock, I feel that way from Northwest Arkansas. Why do we always have to go to Little Rock? Why is I had pledge brothers in school and in college that if you listen to a lot of those guys, the world revolved around Little Rock, Arkansas. That was the center of the universe. And I'm a native Texan. And so I disagree. And I've been to Little Rock, and I've been to Northwest Arkansas, and I've been to other parts, and I don't think Little Rock is the greatest place. So I think it'd be easy to say, well, if we have such a concentration of conservatives in Northwest Arkansas, why are we taking everything down to Little Rock? Certainly, I understand that it's more centrally located. We're not talking about electing delegates to the RNC and doing it in Northwest Arkansas in an attempt to keep the people from the Delta or the people from down in Southwest Arkansas from showing up and getting these delegate positions. Right now, I don't know what's on the agenda, but I've not seen anything, to be real honest with you, about that convention. So I support moving it. I support moving it around the state. Again, like you said, Hamburg. I love Hamburg. I'm perfully good to go down.
Listen, their downtown area
and that area
is on fire.
Let's go.
They've been reviving it.
I don't have a problem with that. And if that's the vision of the current chair to do some stuff like that, then I commend him on that.
Okay.
And sure, he's from Northwest Arkansas. And so maybe that's the first shot at what we had. The other thing is, and we talk about this, we're getting ready to have a meeting where we have over 1,000 people show up. So we've got to have somewhere that can accommodate that, right? So when we talk about getting down into the Delta, do we have a place that can accommodate somebody in the middle of the summer that's not just out in somebody's cornfield where it's 6,000 degrees and you know how it is.
Yeah.
We all grew up with that. I mean, we got to find so let's find places that can accommodate that and can accommodate people to travel. This helps us. You know, people come up here and it helps our economy. We go down to Central Arkansas and it helps their economy. Or we go over to Jonesboro or West Memphis or Blytheville or somewhere, and we're helping that economy. And we should be doing this. I mean, this is what we should be doing, right? Same thing in the Delta, down in the Texarkana area, Arkadelphia, Lake DeGray State Lodge. I mean, there's a lot of good places that we should probably look at to see. And I support that. I support moving things around. Ultimately, our capital is in Little Rock. That's where it should stay. I was joking completely when I said move it.
We know.
But I'm a fan of moving things around the state.
Yeah.
So
All
I
right.
enjoy it.
Thank you. You've been so generous with your time. Anything else that we have not covered that you would like to say? We've covered a lot, but do we miss anything that you want to mention?
No, I don't think so. Hey, everybody get out and vote, and let's get Trump elected and get back to where we need to be, right?
Yeah.
That's ultimately what we
Yeah,
want.
I'm down for that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Brian.
Thank you. I
Really
appreciate
appreciate
it.
it.